Karen yelled at the royal guard and threw a can at his feet, but her boldness turned into shame. Morning in London felt like a watercolor painting. Grey skies, the soft sound of distant rain, and crowds of tourists eager to immerse themselves in British heritage. Guard Robert Wilson stood motionless outside Buckingham Palace, as still as a stone statue. His tall stature, impeccable posture, and stern expression commanded respect, even if you didn't know he embodied discipline and honor. His crimson tunic gleamed in the dim light, and the massive bearskin hat gave him not only an air of authority, but also an almost mythical elegance. For most tourists, he was a symbol of royal tradition, a guardian of centuries-old majesty. But not for everyone. With the loud screech of brakes, a bright tour bus stopped in front of the palace. Tourists spilled out like ants, chattering, laughing, and brandishing cameras. And there, emerging from the center of this buzzing crowd, was her, Karen. Her gait was heavy, much like herself. Her weight wouldn't have been a problem if not for her deliberately ridiculous outfit. A skin-tight t-shirt emblazoned with the words, "I don't care," and shorts that seemed to be in a constant battle to hold their place, digging awkwardly into her body. Her face shone with an oily sheen. Bright pink lipstick clashed with her complexion, and unnaturally black roots peeked out from her otherwise dyed hair. In one hand, Karen clutched an energy drink can, sipping from it with the air of someone holding a royal goblet. "Well, well, here's the famous soldier," Karen declared loudly, her voice echoing across the square. The crowd turned to look. Some chuckled, but most averted their gaze, trying to ignore her. Robert didn't move. His face was impenetrable, his gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the crowd. He knew better than to react, no matter the provocation. It was part of the job, part of his honor. Karen, however, seemed to believe her status as a tourist granted her certain privileges. "Why is he so gloomy?" she shouted, stepping closer. "We're paying to see this, and he's standing there like a statue. What, does he only smile for the Queen?" Her words might have been laughable if not for her tone. Brazen, demanding, as if the palace and the guard himself existed solely for her entertainment. Robert, of course, remained silent, and that silence infuriated Karen. "Hey, do you even hear me?" she yelled, her face reddening as her eyes narrowed. "Your job is to entertain us. Or are you just furniture in that outfit?" Some tourists chuckled, not at Robert, but at Karen's absurdity. She took it as encouragement. The crowd began to gather closer. Some filmed the scene. Others watched with unabashed curiosity. Robert, as protocol demanded, stayed calm. But the truth was, he felt a flicker of irritation, not at Karen's yelling, but at the disrespect her behavior represented. "Come on, say something!" Karen shouted again, stepping even closer. "Can you even talk? Maybe we should cut your salary, or do you think I'm just standing here for fun?" The crowd murmured. Someone quietly remarked, "She's crossing a line now." Karen glanced around, her face a mix of annoyance and smugness. She genuinely believed she could say or do anything because she was paying money. But when you see such a scene, don't you think, who behaves like this? This is beyond rude. Of course you do. And so did the crowd. "Maybe that hat's squeezing your brain," Karen suddenly jeered, taking a sharp step toward Robert. And this was the moment everyone had been holding their breath for. Karen had crossed the white line, the boundary no tourist was allowed to pass. The murmur of the crowd fell silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Robert didn't flinch. He remained the embodiment of tradition and discipline, even as Karen brazenly invaded his space. Meanwhile, she, basking in her perceived triumph, had no idea her behavior was being captured not only by the people around her, but also by numerous cameras. What would happen next? One thing was clear. For Karen, this morning was just getting started. Karen, feeling an imagined sense of power over the situation, took her next step. In her mind, she was the star of the show, and the audience was obligated to admire her. Pulling out her phone, she laughed loudly and shouted, "All right, Mr. Redcoat, let's take a selfie. Let's see what you look like up close." She stepped even closer, nearly crossing the white line that marked the off-limits zone for tourists. The crowd started murmuring. People watched her antics with curiosity, though many already felt a sense of discomfort. Karen raised her phone and with exaggerated enthusiasm declared, "Oh, what a handsome guy." Then, in a loud whisper meant for everyone to hear, she added, "He won't even blink. I'm starting to think he's just a mannequin." Her fake laughter echoed across the plaza. Robert, naturally, remained motionless. "Are you even alive?" she blurted, stepping forward until her flushed face was just inches from his. The crowd tensed. Someone tried to say something, but Karen was clearly not the kind of person who listened. "Maybe you don't even understand English. Or do you think you're the boss here? I'm a tourist, by the way, and I was promised a show." Her voice grew louder, her movements more aggressive. She reached out, aiming for his hat. "Maybe this thing's stopping you from thinking." But before her hand could touch the hat, Robert smoothly stepped back, exactly half a step. The crowd gasped, and someone even clapped. "Wow, he moves!" a tourist shouted. Karen glared at the speaker angrily. "Oh, so you're just going to ignore me?" she snapped, her tone growing sharper. She picked up an empty energy drink can and, with ostentatious defiance, tossed it at Robert's feet. "Go on, pick it up." The crowd began to split. Some filmed the scene, laughing at Karen's ridiculousness, while others watched her with open disapproval. "This is too much," said an elderly man in a formal suit, stepping forward. "Such behavior is unacceptable. He's a symbol of our culture." Karen turned to him, her face a mix of contempt and foolish self-satisfaction. "A symbol? Oh, come on, old man. He's just a guy in a silly hat. If he were so important, he'd at least smile, wouldn't he?" The man shook his head, but said nothing more. Karen, feeling triumphant, stepped even closer, crossing over the white line. "So, what are you going to do about it?" she taunted. "You're just standing there like a statue, and I can do whatever I want." The crowd froze. Everyone knew crossing that line was a serious breach. Guards were trained not to react, but their space was considered sacred and inviolable. Robert remained silent, his gaze steady and focused. Even now, he was the embodiment of discipline. But the mood of the spectators had shifted. Several voices shouted, "You crossed the line! Hey, step back!" Karen turned around, her face now red with anger. "What? You're all on his side? Can't you see he's just standing there like a dummy?" But the crowd was no longer on her side. Phones pointed at her, recording every moment, as murmurs and disapproving headshakes spread through the group. "This is disgusting," someone muttered. Karen looked around, realizing the crowd's attention was now fully on her, but not with admiration. The judgment was palpable. Her moment of perceived stardom had turned into a spectacle of humiliation. Karen tried to reclaim the spotlight. "Well, at least you can do something," she sneered sarcastically, but the crowd stayed silent. A young man with a camera chuckled. "Do you even realize how you look? This guy's just doing his duty, and you're making a fool of yourself. Well, you know." Karen flushed with anger. "Me? We tourists pay taxes. We feed them." The crowd buzzed, and someone shouted, "You're not even from Britain. What taxes?" The laughter grew louder. "Maybe it's time for her to go home before she steals his hat," someone added. Karen, now noticeably pale, hissed, "You're all idiots." She turned and hurried back to the bus, stumbling as she went. Her retreating figure disappearing into the crowd drew a round of applause. Robert, as composed as ever, stood at his post. An elderly tourist approached him respectfully and said, "You are a symbol of our culture. Thank you for your service." Robert adjusted his hat slightly and stood frozen in position once more. The next day, a video titled, "Overbearing Tourist Harasses Royal Guard," went viral. Karen became infamous online as an example of shameless disrespect, while Robert's unwavering professionalism earned admiration worldwide.